So, yeah, do you want to just kind of walk through it? I think it'd be kind of educational too, just to tell everyone like how does a Solidity contract work? Like, what do these things do? Do you want to go through
Sure.
like a few
Actually,
lines at a time?
the second line is interesting in Solidity. One of the things that came back in our audit was that we had used a floating modifier at the start of our Solidity version. And as a result, our auditors at Solid Proof came back and said, hey, you really should make this static. So we actually had an error on this, or not an error. It's not a security flaw or anything, but people like to use this solid one. So we had a different modifier on that, and that was the only thing that really came back in our security audit when we deployed on testnet, that our auditors came back and said, hey, you might want to change this.
Are you talking about the Pragma line?
Yeah, line 2. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, definitely nothing to do with security. Just like a kind of what you said. They came back and said you might want to change it because you made version on the wrong thing.
The way you see it there is the changed version. The previous version had a floating modifier before it. So it basically just meant that the contract should read anything that is an upgraded version of Solidity above 8.0, or that it was indicating that the contract would be compatible with something above 8.0, and it's not. It's static with this version.
Gotcha.
Okay. And so, like, I should clarify, I am not actually one of the developers. I'm work a little bit on the game theory and the product design. So I'm probably not the best person to describe every line of code here, but I can give you the general.
Yeah, not every line. Just we'll go through some of the functions. I know this Open Zeppelin. I did a blog post recently about how to create your own ERC20 with an Open Zeppelin. Super easy to do. You can do it in Remix IDE, all that stuff. Exactly. If anyone's interested, go at rhmax.org/blog and look up the how to make your own ERC20 one. If anybody wants to check that out. But yeah, contract weight. So clear it is burnable. Okay.
So
using Chainlink for Chainlink request.
Yeah, so we had to use Chainlink Oracle in the contract. It's not optimal. And look, if you had a smaller data set to use, you could use a Merkle tree to store all of this data. But the problem with doing that is that you're stuck with the data set that you have as soon as you deploy. And if you know in advance that your data set should be changed because you, for example, want to add additional sacrifices to the set of eligible addresses, you really need to make the database editable. And if you deploy using a Merkle tree, you really can't. So that's why we decided to go with the Chainlink version. None of this is optimal when you're talking about large data sets and off-chain data interfacing with on-chain data. But this is the best we have as an industry right now, unfortunately. So that's the reason for the use of the Chainlink Oracle.
Okay, so it's in a timekeeper total sacks. Okay, so it's using Chainlink to make it editable later on. Okay, because you don't know when the things are actually going to launch. That's the point.
I should clarify that a little bit. So there's two sort of things in the contract that make it not immutable. And the first is the ability of the team here to end minting at any time. The reason, as you correctly identified there, Max, is because if we knew when PulseChain was going to launch, we could do this. We could do this hard coding into the contract, but then obviously we wouldn't have the game theory or anything behind it. So the reason for that is because we have to be able to run the end minting function after PulseChain launches. There have been a couple of theories proposed for how to do this in a trustless way. And we have investigated those with some help from some developers who are in the PulseChain dev chat. Unfortunately, we could do them, but the advice we've been given is that if anything were to go wrong, if like Richard were to change the chain ID or a URL or something like this, it would probably still break things. So you would, even if you did it that way, basically what you would do is you would have a repeated call such that you would try and check for the first block on PulseChain. And then if you wrote that into the contract, then you would know that PulseChain hasn't launched yet. And therefore you wouldn't have to run this manager function after it launched, because the contract could check, know that it's launched because the first block's been mined, and then it could run the function on its own. The advice we got was that, look, if something went wrong, it wouldn't work. So you should probably put a manager function in there anyway. And I mean, if you have to write a backup manager function, then you might as well just have a manager function. So that was kind of the theory behind that.
Okay, gotcha. And these are just different mappings for different variables.
Those are all the mappings for the different functions that you can see. So if you go over to the write contract or the read contract area, that's where you'll see that data.
Functions. Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So if you go, we'll just click on read. So these are different functions. Okay. Gotcha.
Yep.
Cool.
So this is where, in the code there is that's where you would define the read functions.
Gotcha. The structure. Okay. So manager and what does this address go to?
That is the address of the entity that can end minting and distribute bonuses. So one of the pieces of the game theory in the wait contract is that in a similar way to the way Hex was launched, I don't know if you remember that, but I assume you do.
Mm-hmm.
You had this 350-day period where the adoption amplifier was running, and for all of the for all of the Bitcoin holders who decided not to claim their free Hex, 97% of them, largely because they were on centralized exchange wallets and things like this, those Hex were never claimed. And as a result, all of the Hex that was available to be minted by Bitcoin holders was distributed to Hex stakers, in this case, not claimers, but stakers, via an event known as Big Payday. I believe it was November 19th, 2020 from memory. Anyway, so we, being longtime Hex people, we kind of built in the exact same mechanism to the wait contract. So anyone who claims their wait is actually given shares in the midnight bonus. And anyone who decides not to claim wait, you're actually still a network participant in a sense. You're performing an action by performing no action, because your potential weight that you could have claimed will be distributed to the people who did decide to claim.
Gotcha.
And so that address under the manager on line 34 there, that is the address that is able to end minting. And in the process, it will allocate the remaining weight that could have been minted to the shareholders that have minted previously. It does not actually distribute the weight to them, because that would require sending an ERC20 to people. And sending an ERC20, even though it might seem like it's quite cheap, if we were to try and do this, it would cost somewhere in the region of about $700K. And now it would be probably over $1 million to actually distribute it. So people who participate and who come back to the Ethereum chain to claim their midnight bonus do actually have to run a function to mint their midnight bonus. They don't have to check eligibility. They don't have to fund the Chainlink node, but they still do have to mint from the contract.
So those two functions that the manager does, is there a way for us to verify that's the only two things it can do?
It's defined in there, the only thing it can do. So it's actually one function. It just performs two things.
Okay, so we'll get to it in the review.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Total people, pretty self-explanatory. How many people were able to claim from the different sacrifices, right?
Correct. Yep.
Sack times. This is the computer way of saying dates and times. So it looks confusing.
Yeah. So you'll notice there that the sack times and the total people start at 0, which is a pretty common convention in writing code. And then, as you described, that's a computer reference version of a date. Each of those is actually the end date for the sacrifice. And we haven't talked about this, but we actually, if you check that date for Pulse, we actually gave people a little bit of a grace period after the end of the Pulse sacrifice, because we felt that there would be a few people that would. Yeah, we look, we're trying to be inclusive, right? Like, so we tried to put as many people as we could in. We cut it off after a grace period of a month because we felt like that was enough.
There's still people donating. Like, I bet today you look at it, there's people putting some kind of shitcoins in there, I bet.
Exactly. And you had to cut it off at some point, and so we did. And it's not quite the same grace period for all the other projects, but there is a grace period in there.
Gotcha. Set Chainlink token, set Chainlink Oracle. So these are referencing Chainlink tokens and Oracle contracts.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay.
So when a user performs the first function in the contract, the check eligibility function, it actually goes to the Chainlink node, to the Oracle, the address ending in 549 there, and it goes and gets the eligibility status using that job ID just below it. So the job ID and the Oracle is sent to the Oracle contract with the person's Ethereum address under that specific job. And then a message is returned. That message is a string of numbers that denotes their eligibility in the different claims. So all that is returned is either, no number or a specific number that establishes that they're eligible in one of or all of those different 8 projects.
Gotcha. Yep. Okay, cool. Manager function.
You can actually see that math defined a little bit further down. It's a little interesting the way we just decided to do it.
Okay. Maintain with turned off. Cool.
Yeah. So those are the modifiers that you were talking about with the manager contracts just there. Yep.
You still there?
Yep, I'm still here.
Oh, okay.
So you've got that's your check database information there when you're running that Chainlink function and returning the address and returning the eligibility.
Bro man?
Yep.
Okay. What is, just for people watching, why is it bro? Why is it man?
I can't remember. I'll ask one of the devs.
Just for fun. It's gotta be something. Okay.
Yeah, they enjoy themselves.
Yeah. Fulfill, let's see, record Chainlink fulfillment. Okay. More Chainlink stuff.
So that's your Chainlink stuff. And this is where you have your eligibility defined by those different numbers. So I can't remember exactly which one is which, I'm sorry, but I think the yes and then equal to or less than or equal to a specific digit, that establishes your eligibility.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's what's actually returned from Chainlink to the contract and then stored in the contract. So then at that point, your eligibility is stored in the contract, and that's why it's different. That's why it has to be multiple functions performed and multiple gas fees paid, because the contract doesn't actually know who you are until you store your eligibility and your Ethereum address in the contract. And that's something you have to do by checking the Chainlink node. And then when it returns the eligibility, it saves you in the contract so that the next time you come back, it knows how much weight you're entitled to based on the math with respect to the previous times, and then eligibility. That gives you an amount of weight that you're allowed to mint.
Gotcha. Minimal weight. So basically just checking how much you're able to mint based on the person asking.
Yep.
Mint weight. Okay. It checks to see if you've already minted or not. Okay. Exact time. Yeah. And the mint function for the sender. Okay. Mintable all weight. So it's doing the loop to see. Is this coming up with a total that can be minted, or what?
That's if you that gives you or returns you a figure that tells you how much you would be able to mint if you minted all of your weight for all of the projects at the same time.
Gotcha.
So we built it out, and we referenced this in the white paper. We sort of said, everyone's familiar with the concept of dollar cost averaging. And while we don't think a lot of people have used this, I think it's something like 15% of people have chosen not to hit mint or weight at the same time. And what they're doing instead is what we've termed weight claim averaging, where you claim one early, you lock in your shares from that. And then, hey, maybe some of the other ones you want to let, wait a little bit longer until you get closer to the pulse the pulse launch. And that way you get more shares in that specific project's midnight bonus.
Interesting. Yeah, we should talk about the strategies for claiming minting too. Once we get done with this, it's something I think a lot of people will be interested in. Has checked mint all weight. Okay, just more minting functions for people. Okay. Midnight bonus. Yeah. So what is the midnight bonus and how does it work here?
Yeah, so it's our corollary for the big payday, where all of the unclaimed weight is distributed to all of the people who did claim based on their shares in the specific midnight bonus. So it's worth mentioning that we're calling it the midnight bonus. It's actually 8 midnight bonuses, one for each project. If you, for example, were in fiat, this fiat sacrifice, and you decide to claim, it doesn't entitle you to shares in the Pulse midnight bonus. They're project specific, but we're just referring to them as the one thing. And so the manager function that you can see on line 211 there runs the midnight bonus function, distributes the midnight bonus to all of the participants based on their shares, distributes 50% of the midnight bonus to this entity called the timekeeper, which is an Ethereum address, to which you can have no expectations of profit from the work of others, similar to like an OA type entity.
Can you just, while we're on that, can you just talk about the timekeeper? No expectations of them, but like, what is their purpose?
It's to distribute some of the unclaimed weight to a centralized entity that could do something with it in the future and might not. And it's very similar to the OA address in the Hex contract, that in most circumstances, when one of these addresses exists, I can't talk about the timekeeper specifically, but in the case of most other projects that have a function like this, they tend to be benevolent actors who hold and never sell, or utilize their assets in some way that benefits the community.
And what percentage of weight does the timekeeper have?
So it'll depend on how many people claim their weight. If 50% of people claim the weight and the remaining 50% is split 50-50 between the people that claim and the people that don't claim, the timekeeper would wind up with about 25% of the circulating supply. That would be the case on both Ethereum and on PulseChain. And because of the way we've set weight up, there is no inflation after PulseChain launches. So it could potentially be a pretty powerful thing, establishing a set of people who, played the game right and guessed very close to the Pulse launch and minted their weight on both chains. And now there's no inflation in the token. Everybody talks about Bitcoin being not inflationary, forgetting that it is, obviously, but we will genuinely have something here with weight that does not have any inflation. So, any mechanism in the future that we're able to remove weight from supply might be able to have a very positive price impact on it.
Is there any other than the timekeeper? Is there any kind of like founder rewards or anything like that would be in the contract?
No, there's nothing like that.
Gotcha. Okay, mintable unclaimed weight. Still on. Cool. It's more of some simple boilerplate, like check this condition, that condition.
Yeah, something to keep in mind with weight is that there are multiple different claim phases. The first of which is obviously claiming because you're a sacrificer, but the minting of the midnight bonus, you could decide not to perform. Like this would be similar, or not running that function would be kind of like not taking possession of a hex stake at the end of it and running good accounting instead. So, I doubt very much that there are a lot of people will use this. I tend to think that people who receive the midnight bonus will mint it right away. But in the event that they don't want to, it can just stay in the contract. There might be some sort of tax reason why they choose not to do that. So that would be okay too.
So claiming the midnight bonus, and we can get into this when we go through how to claim. But the midnight bonus is, did you say that was like the big payday type thing?
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be allocated to people, but it won't. So unlike the big payday where it was actually distributed to people to their stakes, in the case of the midnight bonus, it would be allocated to everybody who claimed based on their proportion of the shares in their specific project sacrifice. And then they would have to come back to the website or the DApp or the Etherscan and perform an additional function to mint the weight associated with the midnight bonus. And obviously, because the weight contract is going to be forked onto PulseChain, they could technically do this twice, once on Ethereum and then once on PulseChain as well.
And when can people claim the midnight bonus? Is there a certain time period?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of speculation as to when and under what circumstances Richard will actually announce PulseChain. And I know there was some speculation that we would turn off minting as soon as he announced it, right, to sort of end the game. But we're not going to do that. If he announces it and says, hey, you know, PulseChain's launching on Friday, that'll give people plenty of time to come in and mint their weight and lock in their shares and then hopefully receive the midnight bonus. It doesn't make any sense for us to manipulate the system in that way and prevent people from actually getting that bonus. So just wanted to be very clear, like PulseChain launching is the catalyst for us running the manager function that ends minting. The announcement of PulseChain is not, because obviously we have to run it on both chains anyway, right? So if he announces it and there's 2 days, well, that should give people plenty of time to get it.
Gotcha. Minting's still on. Okay. Yeah, that seems about the most interesting parts of it. Looks like.
Yeah, not a terribly long contract. You know, we put it together in sort of 3 weeks and tried to get it out as fast as we could, and yeah, so it's a limited feature set, but hopefully it establishes a group of people who are like-minded and interested in waiting, and those seem like good people to give things to.
Delayed gratification crew. Yes,
indeed. And you know, it's nice to be able to get yield on something that you got for free.
Definitely. Yeah. It's the whole free yield, incentivize, positive feedback loop, staking, like it's they're all these, you know, games to get you to not sell, price go up, you know, be able to get passive income, wealth, things like that. So it's man, very interesting. What about, do you want to go through how, so show me how to claim this on Etherscan?
Sure.
Is that through some of the functions we looked at before? Like, let's see,
read
contract, contract.
Yeah, so just keep in mind the difference between the token URL in Etherscan and the contract URL. Obviously, we're on the contract URL right now, but if you're looking at this as someone who's watching and trying to follow this as a guide, just make sure you're here and not over on the token, because you'll get a little bit confused. So you can click the token tracker in the bottom right there, or just above the ad, to go to the token tracker page, but you really want to be on the contract page to actually perform any functions. So that's the first thing to keep in mind, and just for anyone who's trying to follow along. Yeah. And then you have the ability here to run different functions to either read information in the contract already or to write information to the contract. So you could go and see right now the number of people that have claimed, the claimed amount of weight. You could actually go and see if you've checked your own address before, if you're not sure, on function 6 there on the read. So yeah, exactly. So you can go and perform all of these functions, and you can see general information about the contract and the ecosystem. And then if you actually want to perform functions, you would go over to the write contract area, and you could check your eligibility, and then you could decide either to mint all your weight at once, or you could mint one at a time.
Gotcha. And I don't have MetaMask connected, but obviously you would connect.
Yeah, you would connect your MetaMask here. Remember, you're not connecting to a dApp. So something to keep in mind when you're doing blockchain projects generally. I know you know this, Max, but for anyone watching, you don't have to interact with dApps if you don't want to. They obviously make things easier, right? They provide interfaces that are intuitive, hopefully, and that don't break, hopefully, and that are viewable on mobile and work with multiple wallets. You know, that's the hope for any.
Smart contracts were invented to get rid of middlemen.
Exactly, but you can do all the same stuff on Etherscan, and hopefully, well, certainly on PulseScan as well when PulseChain launches. So it's worth knowing how to do these things. But you still do need to connect your wallet. You still do need to pay gas fees, but knowing how these things work can be very useful. Actually,
that's probably, again, the dApps and the websites, the host them and stuff, those are created to make it easier, give you a nice slick UI to, attract people, things like that. But also, there are attacks where if you go to the wrong website and, you start approving transactions for something that says it's the contract, but it's actually another contract, you went to the wrong website, all that stuff. You need to really check the addresses of the one with the contract on Etherscan, and also, compare that to the one of the token that is legit. And that's one thing you can get around the whole going to the wrong website, getting into a lot of this mess, is to manually claim on Etherscan by connecting your wallet and just calling the functions.
Yeah, exactly. It's important to know when you get a security audit as a developer of a smart contract that the audit is performed on the contract itself. It's not performed on a dApp. You can't actually get a security audit on a dApp because dApps are subject to change. The reason that a security firm like SolidProof, for example, will do an audit on your smart contract is because it's immutable. But they won't come and give you a security certificate saying that your dApp is okay, because you could change half a dozen lines of code in your dApp right after they've done the audit, and they would be providing a security audit for something that has been manipulated thereafter.
So that's for, just to be clear too, you can't get a security audit from a smart contract auditing firm for a website or a portal or a dApp, because the code can change. However, you can get a pen test, traditional security, we call it penetration test, where people actually affirm. You can give your code to them. They'll try to hack the website. They'll try to hack the service, the cloud provider, whatever, in order to see if there's bugs. And, then they can, we found these bugs, you fix them. But once you start adding more features, maybe you need another test. You need another firm to come in who doesn't do smart contract, who does, traditional type of tests for websites. So there's a different route to get security for that. But that you wouldn't go through a smart contract auditor for it.
No, exactly.
So how would you, what are the steps here to claim? Like, can I, I'm not connected to a wallet, but like what functions would we use to claim weight?
Yeah, it's going to be a little tricky to go through all of them without the being connected to the Web3 wallet. But some of these things are just things that you include in a smart contract generally. So, for example, the burn functions that are in there really only exist to allow you to burn a coin or an ERC20 if you want to. We don't have a burn function in our dApp, and there isn't really a reason for anybody to burn the token, but it's something that's included in smart contracts generally. And so when you see this, it's usually not contract specific. It's just a general thing.
Probably from OpenZeppelin, probably. That's the framework used that does a bunch of the must-have functions and all the default boilerplate type stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So the first one you would do on the weight contract would be check database, number 5.
Okay.
Yep. And you could put in if you're connected to your Web3 wallet here, you would put in your address, and then you would write to the contract. And it will pop up with an Etherscan link. It'll cost you, I think, 0.002 ETH to check database.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
And then it will return a value to you. The reason the check database function takes a little bit longer than anything else is because it is talking to that off-chain data. So it's not going to return a value to you in 2 or 3 seconds. It's going to have to go to the Chainlink node, retrieve your address, establish your eligibility, and then add you to the contract. And this is one of the reasons why dApps can be more useful to people, is because on a dApp, you can display a spinner, or you can display we're checking the database message or something. You don't really get that on Etherscan. You can't see what's happening in the background. And so if you're a person who's going to do this, just keep in mind that this data call has to go off chain and come back. So don't go, running multiple transactions for the check database function, because you're just going to waste your ETH. You need to really give it 30 seconds to a minute so that data call can come back.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. So you would write this. It would return your eligibility into the contract, and then if you went over to the read contract function, you would be able to see your eligibility before you do anything else. Under has checked, number 8.
Under has checked. Okay, gotcha.
And that would return true or false if you have checked, and then it would return 10 on line 10 whether you're in the database. And then you could see in database would tell you which one of those projects you're in. We have a list of them on the website, so you can check those out. They're in the contract as well. If you go to read the contract, they're actually in order. So for example, the one on the far left there, the first Boolean would be the 0 number in the contract, which would return Pulse. The second would be the number 1, which would return PulseX, and so on and so forth. I think the 8th of them is internet money.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. And then similar functions just below that for the unclaimed mintable weight. Remember, these are all just read functions. These just allow you to be able to know how much you're entitled to, which sacrifices you are deemed eligible for, etc. None of these things on the read contract side will actually mint the token for you. To do that, you still need to return to the write contract functions.
Gotcha. So to mint, how do we mint once we check our availability?
Yeah, so you have the choice here. You can mint weight, or you can mint all weight. Mint weight line 13 would give you the ability to mint weight from a specific project. So remember those number naming conventions we were talking about on the read side. Here you would come and you would put in the integer of the sacrifice that you were eligible for, and then you would write. So if you put in 0, you would know that you were eligible for Pulse, and then you would write in this case, and it would mint your eligible Pulse for you. Sorry, it would mint your eligible weight for you based on the Pulse sacrifice.
Right.
Similarly, on line 11 or function 11 there, if you wanted to just mint all of your weight at the one time, you could run that function here. And, if anyone is curious, this is actually where the manager would write the functions to, on line 10, mint all unclaimed weight and distribute the midnight bonus on line 9 or function 9.
Midnight bonus. Gotcha. So we checked the eligibility. We mint, let's say we just do mint all weight. And then would we be able to choose whether to mint the midnight bonus after that?
Not at this time. You would have to wait for PulseChain to launch, and
have to wait.
Obviously,
exactly.
You'd have to wait, and you would have to. I would recommend coming to one of our verified distribution channels, making sure that you're in the right place when you go to do this, because you might have done this the first time around, and someone could have deployed malicious code or have socially engineered you in some way. So you want to be very, very careful that when you come back to mint your midnight bonus, you're minting it from our contract and not from somebody else's. Because if you've done this once, you tend to establish that, oh, okay, I know how to do this. But if you've only done it once and you're not used to checking, then you could be socially engineered such that someone would direct you to a fraudulent contract. So don't think that just because you've done it once that you can be like, oh, I know how to do this and not check and not be diligent. You still need to be very diligent.
So basically saying bookmark this video and come back and watch it several times.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe we can do another one right after launch and put some links in the description so people go to the right place, because we certainly don't want anyone to be messing around with their sacrifice addresses and their sacrifice wallets. Those things should be considered your most valuable asset for a lot of people. And we don't want anybody to get in a situation where they've compromised those wallets. It's essential that you learn how to do this and do this safely.
Yep, for sure.
Okay. Or don't claim your weight and let it go to the timekeeper and everybody else.
It's an option. Yeah, definitely is. Is that it then? That's all we got to do to claim it from Etherscan?
Exactly. Yep, that's all.
And then so it'll show up, weight will show up in the Ethereum wallet, and then it'll be copied over PulseChain. We'd see the same thing.
Yeah, it won't actually show up automatically in your Ethereum wallet. You would have to go and add the weight contract as an asset in your Ethereum wallet first. Now, again, you want to be very careful when you do this that you're not adding another contract. So you would copy the contract address, go to your MetaMask, add a custom token, paste the address in. I think if you do that manually, what you'll find is that the weight icon, the logo, won't actually be imported. I think in order for it to be imported, you would have to do this through our DApp where the icon is. So that's a little bit unfortunate. That's another reason why you might want to use a DApp. It's also a reason why we would need to go and update the tracker information here, because that would allow it to happen.